So I'll go to the scripting shell and I'll import the WebSocket client binary. Okay, now I've added the exe. Now I'll import the namespace. Okay, so I've imported the namespace. Now I should be able to do everything that I was able to do earlier from the GUI. I should be able to do that from the scripting shell in Python or in Ruby. So for the purpose of this exercise, I'll be making use of, I'll be issuing commands in Python. The first thing I'm going to do is create a WebSocket client. So I would say sync WebSocket client. So this stands for synchronous WebSocket client. I'll explain why this is a synchronous client in just a little bit. So here I'll enter the URL. And then I'll enter the origin. And the third argument, which I would pass to the connect method, would be the value of the cookie header. Now in this case, the cookie header value is empty, so I'll just leave it as an empty string. Say ws.connect, and yep, so now we have established a WebSocket connection to the server. Now let's send a message. So I'll say ws.send, and I'll say cmd start session. So this was the first message which the browser sent, so let's send the same thing. Okay, the message has been sent. Now let's look at the message which was sent, which has come from the server. So I'll say ws.read, and this is the message which has come back from the server. So it says code is session started, and then we have the session ID value. Now there's something interesting going on here, which is after I said ws.send, I said ws.read, and it gave me the message which was sent by the server. Now typically WebSocket is an asynchronous protocol, which means you send messages, but you don't necessarily have a read message API call. What you have instead is a callback called onMessage. So anytime a message comes back from the server, the onMessage callback is executed, and then you handle the message. So this is how it happens in JavaScript. So what I've done is I've tried to convert that into a synchronous protocol. So when you say ws.read, the API will wait for up to 5 seconds. It will look for new messages for up to 5 seconds. If there is a new message from the server during the 5-second period, it will return that message to you immediately. If there is no message in those 5 seconds, then it throws a timed out exception. But if you would say want to wait a little longer, so you know that in your particular case, the server sends a message only after 10 seconds or 15 seconds, then you can actually pass in an argument here, which is ws.read, and you could say 10,000 milliseconds, so it will wait for 10 seconds, and if there is no messages within 10 seconds, then it throws an exception. If there is a message, if there is at least one message, then it will return that message here. So you could read multiple messages using it. If it receives more than one message, it stores it in an array, and you could just keep calling ws.read, and it will give you all the values which are present in the array. If there are no messages during, after timeout, it throws an exception. So it's a very simple kind of an API, and it converts the asynchronous WebSocket implementation into a synchronous system. So it's easier for you to write scripts from Python or Ruby. Okay, so now let's go back to the message that we received from the server. So far we have seen how to create a WebSocket connection, how to send a WebSocket message and how to receive the WebSocket message from the server. Now, the WebSocket messages typically tend to be JSON messages, and if you're looking at manipulating the JSON messages, for example, if you would have to, uh, uh, like let's take the example that we discussed earlier, which is if you're going to guess for different command names, right? So you're going to have to edit the value of the command parameter, command property, which means you would have to modify the JSON message that you're sending to the server. Now this would require some kind of JSON parsing API. Now what I've done is I have added a new command to the tools API called parse as tools.parse as JSON. So I could pass in JSON string here, and let's see. Okay. So now this gets converted into a JSON object. So I could say JSON CMD, and it will give me the value of that particular property, which is start session. So now let's try something else. Let's say, okay, the response that we got from the server. Let's say we want to get the session ID value from the response. So what I'll do is I'll say tools parse as JSON MSG. Okay. So I'll say JSON, we are interested in session ID. Okay. Oops, session ID. Alright. Dot toString. Alright, so this is the session ID value. And if you see, the session ID value is encapsulated by by the double quotes, which are at the end of the property. So we will have to use strip double quotes. Now anytime you're reading the value of a JSON property, so you say the name of the JSON object, name of the property dot toString, and then you strip out the double quotes at the start and end of the JSON value, and you have the JSON. You have the JSON value that you're looking for. Let's say the JSON string that you're trying to deal with is in the form of a JSON array. For example, let's say it's something like this. Have 1, comma, and then here you have okay. Now let's say this is in the form of an array where the first array item is a number, the second array item is the object, and the third array item is a string. So I'll say JSON, I'll say 0 to string. Now this gives me the value at the first place. I'll say JSON at 1. Now this gives me the value of the second place. If I say A to string, so this gives me the value 1, 2, 3, and then if I say JSON 2, this should give me the value in the value of the third item in the array, right? So by using the tools.parse as JSON property, you should be able to parse any kind of string into a JSON, and then you can basically access these values, and you can even modify these values. For example, if I wanted to modify the value of A, I'll say A equal to XYZ, and then I'll say JSON.toString. And now you can see that in this case, the value of A has been changed from XYZ. It was 1, 2, 3 earlier. We have modified it to XYZ. So by using this, you can parse the JSON messages which you get from the server, and then extract whatever data you want. And the messages that you want to send to the server, you can modify any of the properties, any of the sections of the JSON message, and then you can convert it to a string, and then you could pass it to W as the send command of the WebSocket client API, and you should be able to interact with the server. So, and once you are done, you could say ws.close, and this will terminate the WebSocket session. So this is basically everything that you require to know about the WebSocket API. And what I've actually done is I have written a script which will basically perform the actions that we did from the WebSocket client, which is to find out the different commands which are available on this particular implementation. So I'll clear the shell output here. So this is the script which does it. So what it does is it has a bunch of verbs and a bunch of nouns because the format of the commands was a verb followed by a noun. For example, it was start session, get product, get product. So I've got a bunch of verbs and a bunch of nouns, and what I'm doing is I first create the WebSocket connection, and then I loop through the verbs and nouns, and then I combine them in every possible combination, and then I try to see if this command is supported by the server. So what I do is I use the session ID, I set this command that we just created, I send it to the server, and then I look at the message from the server and I see if the message is equivalent to invalid command or if it is something else. So it's a fairly straightforward script. Now let me run this. And okay, so here you can see the script running, and it's trying a lot of different command combinations. And for get user it says incomplete message, get users it says incomplete message, and get error it says take error. So these are valid commands. Create user again is a valid command because we get incomplete message. Delete user is a valid command, we get an incomplete message here. So the other combinations we tried did not succeed, which means there are no commands with those names. Okay, so this is how, using a script, you could actually try and guess what are the valid command names on this particular this particular demo application. Now, once we know the command names, we could actually go ahead and we could test the different, or the part of the testing we did with the product's ID, where on entering a single code, it basically threw an exception. Now that part can be automated as well. So I have done that here. So this is a piece of script which will basically load a bunch of payloads from FuzzDB, and then it will loop through each payload and it will send it as the product ID. And once it sends this, it will send the get error message, and it will see what is the data, what is the info value of the take error message from the server, and it will print it onto the screen. So again, a fairly straightforward script. Now let me run this. So you can see it's trying out different payloads, and it keeps saying no error, meaning there was no error on the server. Now let's actually let this run for some time and see what happens. Okay, it's still trying different payloads, no errors. So none of these payloads are actually having any effect on the application so far. Okay, so now for this payload, now because this payload has a single quote in it, we can actually see that the detailed XPath exception messages have been printed to the screen. So by using a script like this, you could test every interesting field in your WebSocket implementation for any kind of security problems. So you're basically writing your own custom fuzzer for that particular WebSocket implementation. So by using these tools, you should be in a position to test any kind of WebSocket implementation that is out there. All right, guys. So this is it. I hope you found this information useful. WebSockets is a really new, uh, functionality. People have only just started using it. Now I see some applications which use WebSockets extensively. In fact, the whole application, is built on top of WebSockets, and it's only going. The number of WebSocket implementations are only going to increase. The level at which WebSockets are used in applications, it's only going to increase. So I hope this knowledge would help you test any WebSocket implementations that you come across in during your pen test. If you have any comments or so on the techniques which were discussed, or if you have any suggestions, you can let me know, and I'll try to incorporate them into the tool itself or into the next video that I make. Thank you so much.